So, why don't we go to the staff report.
Okay, well, let me just preface by saying that I would have come back to you guys with an update about what was happening with the matrix and what was happening with the auditor. However, Sharon was actually the last person to sit in the meeting about what is happening with the auditor, so I thought it'd be best to have her come and speak. So thank you so much, Sharon Erickson, City Auditor, for coming.
Okay, so I'm mostly here to listen and actually try to answer some questions. So one thing Sabrina and Lee Wilcox and I did was sit down to talk about whether or not you all could get an audit back to you on the use of the funds like the other bond and parcel tax committees get. So I don't quite know where to start. So none of you are on any of the other Citizens Oversight Committees, right?
No.
And have you ever been on a Citizens Oversight Committee?
No.
We're all rookies.
Did you see our shopping list that was sent to Lee Wilcox several times of what we were looking for, what we wanted to get identified?
No.
Okay. That was kind of a shopping list of what we wanted to see.
Okay.
We also had and forgive me for jumping in here.
No.
We came up with a work plan for this committee.
Okay.
Right? And in that committee, we developed a charter of what the scope of what we were doing. We recognized that we were oversight, we were not auditors. Okay, we were going to have findings. We were going to look at some data and report on that. Okay, based on what was given to us. Okay, and one side of that was going to be the Measure B. What was the wording in Measure B as to what Measure B was supposed to do, and then the result of those Measure B funds being dispensed and used and how they work. Okay. And just what happened with those Measure B funds. So anyway, we developed a plan, we developed the charter, and we had a couple of sessions, I think, with Lee, when we submitted that several times for some kind of answers to come back. Okay. One of the things in the part of the discussions was to have a conversation with you to see what kind of data you'd give us, okay? So that we could possibly reuse that data based on what we see in your report that you publish, your annual report, because we'd like to reuse that data, okay? And in some case, maybe, whatever, rather than reinvent data. So if we knew kind of what we were going to get, we could make some determination how and then we came up with a draft report. So we made a dummy report based on kind of what we thought we would get. And we these are all not accurate data, but we just filled in the blank with something, rather than start off, when we finally got data, we wouldn't be starting off at the last second trying to invent something.
Right.
Okay, and we hope to get some comment back on this, so we never did. Now, the commission, the neighborhood commission, has approved our charter, and more or less has approved our plan, and we were going to present this dummy report, a draft report, prototype report to them, so that they would have an understanding of what they were going to get, and maybe possibly comment on that and say, hey, yeah, this would serve the purpose, of when we got it. So there's no graphics in there. I was hoping maybe we'd throw in some pie chart, maybe some bar charts, just to kind of simplify some of the data, just instead of having just raw numbers in there. And but anyway, that's what we did. Okay. But we never could get off the dime because we never got any. It's all been communication's all been one way.
Yeah. Okay. So on some of that, I think, so when were you thinking to produce this report?
Well, that was the other thing. We were going to produce it based on when we got the data.
Right.
Okay, and the expectation, we get the data, and we have a month, 2 months or so. That's why we didn't want to wait till we drafted all this stuff in anticipation of getting something and having, more or less, having everything lined up, and then all we'd have to do is plug in numbers and reconcile things, and that was it. But we could never communicate with anybody to get any answers.
So this report is on fiscal year 16-17. Our idea was to get it done by June of this year, so that we would have a year afterward to get these reports
That was the
through.
goal. That was the original goal.
Yeah.
That was the idea.
And that was,
So that
when
every
we
year there'll be
started
one.
in what, November?
Yeah.
When we started, that to me was a realistic
Right.
goal. Here we are in April,
Yeah.
and we're no further, well, semi-further than we were in November, only because of what we've done in this preliminary stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean,
We're just spinning our wheels.
I don't know, it looks to me like you got a great report going there. So we just need to help you fill in the blanks.
And the
Yeah,
numbers,
and
because
they-
these numbers are not necessarily.
They're not real numbers.
The
vetted.
numbers are,
They're
they're
not
just
real
just,
dummy
numbers. They're
numbers,
just
yeah.
numbers put in there
Yeah.
that show an example of what we would put in there possibly and what the
Right.
finding was. So, in other words, you know, here's the result, like 7.1.1, you know,
Right.
you had something, and then the one-time saving, blah, blah, blah. So you had an explanation of that, okay, and then improved burglaries, okay? That was, and we pulled this out of this matrix.
So
All
this
the
is the
information in
matrix.
there is pulled out of this
Okay.
matrix, okay? And we just,
and can I ask a stupid question? So who compiled this matrix?
So the structure of the matrix was initially recommended by Lee. I put it together and then turned it over to Bonnie Long from the budget office.
Okay.
Bonnie put in the numbers. We've had a couple of revisions to it. This is not necessarily the black and white version that's on the PDF. I think is the most recent version. But because it was a PDF, I didn't bring it. Can't change it.
so there's an update to that was mainly kind of repackaging or resorting
Right.
some material was put in there. The restructuring of this matrix was put in a structure that matched the Measure B language.
It
MBA
matched the
14.
MBA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the MBA 14.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
I've been trying to
the
collect up
MBA,
some of these guys.
yeah, but in the, for example, in Measure B, like you had transportation, you had public safety, or whatever, so all the items that were the language of Measure B, we restructured the matrix so it fell into those categories
nice.
specifically. Okay,
Nice.
so you have a one-to-one correlation with Measure B language and this, and then that report. That's how that report is organized according to the structure of Measure B. So I'll go back to that report. I don't know if I put a table of contents in front of that or not, but anyway, all the major headings, I guess, all the major headings in there, like 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, are all, those are the, like improving 911, repairing potholes, expanding
It matched.
maintaining. So that would be 7.1, it would be probably 7.2, would be 911, 7.3 is potholes, 7.4 is damage. So that lines up, it all correlates with Measure B language. So if somebody reading this and looking at Measure B, looking at this, they've got, it's all there, you understand?
Well, I am so impressed, let me just say, I am so impressed. I mean, you have done a really terrific job laying this out.
Everybody,
Yeah.
we've
This
been,
is
everybody
great.
showed up to all these meetings.
Yeah.
And we put a,
Yeah.
we got a lot of investment in here
Yeah.
with
that
people
is-
wanting to get this
Okay.
and comply with what we were
Right.
tasked to do. The frustration is that we're
Right.
not getting there. Now, in
Okay,
going
so
with that, we
for-
drafted 2 letters.
Okay.
One letter we've already sent to the city manager, and I don't think we really got a response from the city manager.
Well, maybe
It
that's
said
why
this.
I'm.
Well, we didn't get a response, we did not.
It is in fact, I
We
think,
didn't
why
get-
we're here, actually, yes.
But see,
Thank you,
you didn't
Yes.
preface your,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to be smart with you,
No.
please don't,
No.
listen.
No.
You didn't preface your opening remarks with, I'm here as a result of your letter to the
No,
city manager.
no, I,
We drafted a letter to the mayor, which we have not sent yet.
okay.
And we're in the process possibly drafting a letter to the Rules Committee,
To,
expressing our frustration.
with being able to get
But not
these
being able to
numbers.
get the data and not being able to move ahead.
Okay. So what you've got here is the total in the MBA was 30, so what, the first numbers you need are just the dollars that were spent, right?
Yes.
Dollars
Dollars
collected
that
and spent.
that were received.
Right?
We don't
Here's
have
the
that.
letter.
What were the funds that were
Here's the letter that went to
received
Dave.
as a result of Measure B?
Can you, like, I'm trying to write down all the, I hate this document center thing we've got. So 746.
I think actually Sabrina can send you the whole.
Yeah, we can
You can
give
send
you a
me
data
these, I
dump
think.
of all
Yeah.
that stuff, Sharon.
Okay, so in 1617, the MBA, which I pulled up,
Mhm.
that totaled $30 million.
Right.
And so did anybody ever tell you how much money we actually got in?
No.
No.
We have been, it filled in with 30 million, but we had heard from Lee that it was actually slightly less, and yet the budget numbers are still coming in at 30, so we don't know what's right.
It was, so I'm looking at the city's general fund forecast, which is where I found information about the local sales tax measure. Now, we'd have to get it from them, but I had that they took it down to 26 million.
And
That's what we heard.
That's reality.
Yeah,
we're
so
okay
we
with
just
that.
need to get that number, and that's, I'm sorry, here it is, 26.5 million, which reflected actual performance for the first 2 quarters and estimated receipts for the final quarter. So they may not have the solid numbers yet, but that's easy to get. It's easy to get.
The other thing, once again, that's
You
why
would think.
it's important for us to talk to someone that we can talk to,
Yeah.
like yourself or someone in budget or somebody. We kind of have expectations of what might happen or occur, okay?
Right.
And so let's say we had let's just talk to 30 million. And that was broken up among, the transportation and the public safety. And they would have had a budget, if there wasn't a Measure B for that particular year, they would have had a budget, let's say one of those departments would have had a budget maybe of 10 million,
Right.
okay? And as a result of Measure B, now maybe they have a budget of 12 million. They got a $2 million plus up. Okay? So our expectations are that as a result of Measure B, they didn't get their budget cut $2 million, and they ended up with a $10 million budget. You understand?
Yeah.
That's our expectation. And if that happened, then that's a finding in our report. So we're looking at plus-ups for those departments that got Measure B, that here's a budget, and then here's a Measure B bonus, okay? Here's your budget, and here's a Measure B bonus, okay? Now, how that Measure B got distributed amongst those people, maybe somebody got all of it, or a good portion, somebody didn't get it, because that was just the reality for that year, and that's okay, as long as it was spent on it. So that's kind of where our mind's thinking. And if that's the wrong assumption, see, we wanted to know that.
Right.
We wanted to know that back here, not in April, so that we wouldn't have that mentality. You see what I'm saying? We want to be in sync
Yeah.
with how things happen.
Yeah, and I think when I first talked to Lee and Sabrina, quite honestly, I figured the money was going into a special fund, in which case it's pretty easy to track the money moving out of a special fund.
Absolutely.
Turns out it comes from the state in like a transmittal, and it all goes into the general fund. So they get reports, so they can tell you how much money came in. So they've
Yeah.
got reports from the state.
Right.
So that we can, we can confirm, people who,
Sure.
auditors can confirm that was how much money was received. What's more difficult, as I understand it, is to figure out how to trace the dollars out. It's just like if you get income into your checking account, which extra dollar went towards rent this month is more difficult to track. But it seems to me there is some kind of a compromise here, because I mean, one thing is to request that the money be put in a special fund so that it can be audited and tracked separately. That really complicates staff's life, because then they've got to figure out which of these dollars that paid these cops came from which fund, and they would rather it all just be in one.
Of course.
So I think it's a
Yes.
question of what the committee feels like you need in order to be able to do your job.
And once
So-
again,
so
having
the-
a conversation
Right,
like this
right.
months ago would have,
Right, it would have helped,
yes.
yeah.
And we wanted that.
And I think, if this kind of document would work for you, I don't see why the budget office couldn't do it. Now, and I was glancing at the report you were trying to do, but if you want to be able to say that we put $10 million towards this, and this was the result in terms of, here we're tracking burglaries. So you said I'm just making up numbers.
Right.
Said we should track burglary, we were going to promote burglary prevention, and here's the metric by which we're measuring that. It seems to me that they should be able to tell you how much of this $26.5 million for that year went towards burglary prevention. I mean, am I missing? It seems like it's a pretty straightforward exercise if you don't demand that they trace dollar for dollar. Now, if you want to know dollar for dollar, that's going to get more complicated. So figuring out how much they can tell you how much where they put burglary prevention.
It's on the last page.
So they told you they were going to add $1.53 million to burglary prevention, and that it's ongoing. So for the next 15 years, you want to know that at least $1.53 million went to burglary prevention.
Not necessarily.
Do you want to know the incremental amount?
No. That 1.5, they said ongoing,
Right.
and that was the goal or projection for this particular year. Next year's reality, and this is okay, as far as I'm concerned, it's okay, but we originally wanted to have $1.5 million this year, but because of something else, we're not going to do that, and that Measure B money went to another Measure B appropriate budget or fund, okay?
Right.
And that's okay.
Okay, good.
And
By
then
the way,
whoever's doing the report next year could make a comment on that. Last year's report said that this was going to be an ongoing thing, however, blah, 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 blah. You see what I mean? And then you have that continuity from year to year for,
Yeah.
this project
Yeah.
and how it goes.
So you've asked the budget office for where they actually spent the
I don't know that I'm asking them a question in a way that makes sense to them. Like, I don't know that I'm asking them what I'm trying to ask them.
That matrix that you have is their response to us, which
Yeah.
said that they spent $30 million in exactly the way that they intended to,
But
which smells like a bad fish to us.
Yeah, they didn't, because they
Yes.
only got 26.5. I
Right.
mean, at least
So from the
according
very
to
get-go, we're not, that is not accurate.
Yeah.
But going to your thing about pulling things out incrementally, I have, because of the environment that I came out of over the years, I had to do incrementally, account for funds that I got, okay? And I had level of effort, which was just labor costs or something like that, and came into work, and even though you did a timesheet and all that, you just worked. Then I had specific work breakdown structured tasks that were very itemized, very specific, and measured because you had completion of items. Okay, you completed a task, how many hours, blah, 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 and what was done for that, those amount of money, those amount of hours. So on Measure B, and I brought this up three times, Measure B is a change order, as far as I'm concerned. You had your scope of work before Measure B. It was this big. When Measure B comes in, gives you X dollars more, and there's a certain amount of work involved with administering that Measure B. Okay, it's a change order. Here's Measure B. Now you got to manage Measure B. Okay? And to me, it's totally appropriate to allocate costs of managing and administering those things associated with Measure B. For example, the independent auditor, that's a extra task that is not accounted for to do. Okay, that's a Measure B specific task. To me, it's totally appropriate to take dollars out of Measure B, got 26 million, whatever it was, and pay an independent auditor. Pay extra accounting fees to account for that, track that. Totally appropriate. If there's extra labor involved to do that, pay for that. Because when you get done doing that, there's the cost of doing Measure B, and everybody's okay with that because, boy, you had apples and apples, and they didn't get blended and general funded and all this and that stuff. And then, you know, we did the three-card Monte and came up with, supposedly, what happened to Measure B money.
Yeah, see, here, instead of doing a change order, they kind of redid the contract, just up the amount. And so it's pretty hard to see where the dollars, it is hard to trace the dollars. But if what you all want, I was just looking to see, so on the parcel tax, the library parcel tax, it goes into a special fund. And it has to be used for specific purposes. So they spend it straight out of that fund. So they can get an audit report that says where it was spent. This money is just going into the general fund.
So I think that's our starting point. And I think they do need to fix this because this is year one. This is the opportunity for us to catch
And we can identify that
I mean,
as a finding.
I can tell you, I mean, I work for a nonprofit. My salary comes out of 6 different budgets.
Yeah.
And our CFO, in 2 minutes, can pull a report
Yep.
that tells you specifically out of each hour of the day which budget paid me.
Yeah, you can imagine.
So I can't imagine, and
Yeah.
she's one person. I can't imagine why we wouldn't be able to do
And the
that.
other-
So the only difference is you probably have designated funding. So the funding stream comes in and it's designated for a certain purpose. For the city, this was a general tax, not a special tax.
Right.
So it just kind of, it's as if it just
Yep.
came into your base budget. And so it's a chore to do it. I think
Absolutely.
it's your right to ask for that if you need it. That's not the way the ballot measure was structured. So
know.
I'm just saying that because you may get some pushback.
Right. And they came up in the meetings that we went to that were promoting Measure B. And that subject came up, and they said no, because people said we're concerned that we passed these measures and the money never gets spent on what it was supposed to do. And oh no, we're going to have oversight, and that's not going to happen. Really, I'm serious. And even then, if you read the ballot measure,
Right.
I think it was the mayor said he was one of the proponents, saying, oh no, we're going to do this, we'll have oversight, and that's not going to happen. So, but let's say, go back to what you said, the state gives us money every month, or however we get the allocations every month. In a simplified way, I forget what the total is, somewhere along that line, there was some number, we only get out of that total sales tax, we only get like 1-point-something% or something like that. Of that 1.7, if we simplify that, just once again, I'm not a CPA, but if we're getting we're getting $1 million a month from the state as a result of our share of that tax, and that comes in, isn't 1/4% of that we got that month part of Measure B?
Well, they can actually tell you, they separate it out.
No, but
So
just
so
the
it's
fact
easy
that
to see.
of
Yeah,
that
that's my
total
understanding.
let's say it was 1.5%, and then we got the 1/4%, so now it's 1.75%, let's say, okay? I'm just rounding off. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I'm just trying to, I'm thinking on my feet here as, I mean, we're getting deep down in the weeds, whether there's anything that Measure B would apply to that the rest of the base sales tax wouldn't. I think we're good, but I don't know
Yeah, but
enough
just-
about sales tax.
But I mean, just as an example, if it was
Yeah.
1.5,
Yeah.
and then Measure B added another quarter, so that may be 1.75,
Yep.
so they get that
Yep.
money, and so you take a
Yep.
1/4%, that's Measure B, that goes into a bucket. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
There's no bucket.
oversimplifying.
The problem is there's no bucket.
Yeah, that's the
Huh?
problem.
There's no bucket.
It's just going straight to the pool.
There is no
I
bucket.
know.
But
Yeah.
you could create a bucket. Yeah.
We could ask for a bucket to be created.
You could
Yes,
ask
that
for
could be the
bucket to
finding for this year.
It could be.
That would be something.
Or the alternative is, I mean, and what I'm seeing from you here is if you do it on a budgetary basis, then you don't, then I still want to know how much money actually came in, because that's an easy number to
Yeah.
find. I mean, but you want, so we should know how much was spent, but then they should be able to tell you on a budgetary basis where they spent the money. That, I'm thinking out loud here, but that would allow you to comment like soon at the time the budget is adopted, and then review expenditures later. So if they said they allocated $17.7 million towards street repair, the budget office should be able to certify to you that yes, they did add $17.7 million. And you could track it in this kind of format if
Yes.
this works for you. Wouldn't require a bucket, but it does require responsiveness from your budget office.
Yeah, and
We
the other
just
thing,
need
but
to
that
know.
17 million hopefully would be in addition to their previously agreed upon budget and not.
It actually is.
It's a plus up.
It's in the writing in there. They actually wrote it in there saying that they're using a number of 30.6 million. It's how much they put in for that street repair stuff. So that 17 is in addition to it.
Is or is not?
Is.
Is.
So they said it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
The way I'm reading
And
it.
that's kind of where
Yeah.
we want
Me
to
too.
have that assurance that,
I think some of these were a little problematic. I mean, I was worried, one of them said they were going to add 14 CSOs, community service officers. Well, the price of that is going to change from year to year. So if
Yeah.
I were them, I'd say, we're going to contribute out of the sales tax money $1.53 million for community service officers. And then if they want to plus up next year because everybody got a raise or they hired more, they just put it in next year's column. But then when they report to you the total spent, it's got to match to the total you
Yeah.
receive.
Well,
I mean,
if
So
we were to
it
ask
makes
a,
it hard to believe.
Right.
sorry, if we were to ask a question, you know, what's missing right now is that we should have the 2017, 2018 budget numbers,
Right.
right? Because they're already in place for the last almost year now.
Yeah, but we don't need that.
we don't.
We're
need-
working 16,
16,
17.
17. That's all we're
Yeah,
concerned about.
okay, I see what you're saying.
We're retrospective, we're not prospective.
But to make sure that things are moving
Yeah.
right.
The
you
other
might
thing
wanna
is, you know, it
make sure
sounds
you've
like,
got
you
those.
know, it sounds like, you know, the train's left the station, and we're not going to change anything, so we kind of need a solution
The-
for this year.
So-
But what I'd like to have is a recommendation for next year, people taking this on, okay? And having in place a better accountability, you know, what have you, so that, you know, it's clearer and you know, this should not be painful. It should not be painful, okay?
So just to your point regarding the 2017-2018 numbers, because some of this stuff was one-time funding, that's why, for example, street repair says NA under that column. If you go to the second page and you look at the second item, improve emergency medical response, it says ongoing, no increase to service level. That means you're supposed to understand that it's still 1.25.
Right, right. So I'm just
Right.
asking where the other 17 million is. That's all I'm asking.
Oh, from this one? Like what happened to that? Because if we're not using it for this year, then where did it go? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's all
I
I'm
see what you're
asking.
saying,
You know, I
okay.
mean, so if
Yeah.
the next budget had 17 million in it that wasn't being used and it's supposed to be underneath funding,
Where did you spend it?
right? Because I didn't know that. I never really understood the street repair thing to be one-time funding.
Can I
Just
throw
saying.
one other issue
When I
on the
voted
table?
on it, you know,
I
I mean,
see.
I
I
don't
see what
remember
you're
that.
saying, yeah.
But I'm asking that question, you know, if there should be another item showing me 17 million.
And,
you know.
and then this document, the forecast, now it isn't the adopted budget yet, is projecting for 18-19 that local sales tax receipts will grow by 2%, total 41.8.
Right.
So for 18-19, if this committee wants to make recommendations about the budgeted expenditures for local sales tax for 18-19,
Right.
So that's going to be happening May
Like right now.
1st.
Yeah.
Through June, it gets adopted. So it's kind of a question of how proactive you also want to be. So do you want to be reviewing that budget? Or do you want to just be looking backwards? Because then,
Well-
if I were you, I would request to see where they're expecting to spend the 41.8.
I'm not sure we'd have to, I don't know, maybe look at the charter. That might be more for neighborhood commission rather than
Okay.
oversight.
They will talk
Because
about
our,
that next week, for
I
sure.
kind of looked at the oversight, we
As
kind of
after
had
the
a
fact?
scope, we scoped
Yeah, it's
out,
after
it
the
was
fact.
kind of this
Okay,
big.
okay.
Neighborhood commission's definitely
Yeah.
supposed to
Yeah.
do this, and the neighborhood, ideally, the neighborhood's commission recommendations would have been influenced somewhat by this report being complete, and then they could look at this report and have that as one of the things in their evaluation to make that recommendation. You see what I mean?
Yeah, 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 makes sense.
Which is
Can I
why
throw-
we wanted it, done earlier.
Let me throw one other thing on. One of the issues we've messed around with here is $17,700,000 is going to go into street repair. How do we demonstrate that that 17 million wasn't put here and another 17 million fell off the table on the other side? So it's what Gary is referring to as a plus up. So this is supposed to have been incremental to existing budgets, not money from one source being replaced with this other source. And that's one of the things we've really wrestled with as we go. So it needs to have some integrity.
Yeah, and where have you ended up on that so far?
Nowhere.
We've
got
Here.
We don't have any
Thank you.
data. We don't have the data. It comes back to getting the data, getting the information.
Right.
Well, you
And we
have
wanted to
data,
have.
you're
we-
just
yeah.
suspicious of it.
It's both.
We wanted to have this kind of iterative, feedback, you know what I mean? So that we had this we never got communication with anybody.
I think the problem of, I call it supplanting, one revenue source supplanting another revenue source
Mhm.
is really hard and really complicated to keep track of. It's especially with numbers this big. So you're adding 17.7, well, street repair is actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Because they're down so low, anything you add is going to be brand new, so. Improve fire medical response, so 4.85 million to restore overtime funding and add back some positions. So the budget office can tell you on a budgetary basis where they put the money. How you're going to be able to track that they couldn't have found extra money in property tax or some other place to cover it, I think is the problem, if that makes any sense. So they got,
Yeah.
they
Yes,
got
it
money
does,
coming
yeah.
in from all sources.
Right.
I think that's where I kind of think maybe the solution is this budgetary basis where, the city's budget doesn't actually go through, it only really documents changes. I mean, you'll hear me rant about this all the time. I mean, they'll pass $1 billion that's just kind of ongoing, and all they talk about is the $30,000 copier that they're going to add, or they're going to drop a position, and the rest of the billion doesn't even get talked about. But they do a good job of tracking those changes. So if you were willing to use the city's budget document as the source document for what was adopted and then what was spent in these categories, maybe there's a way to do that. I don't know you're going to be able to get to the, I think even the library parcel tax they keep coming up with, well, I mean, the Oversight Committee wrestles with, well, how do we know that you bought books with this money that you wouldn't have bought with your regular money? And it is really hard to do that, because if they got some extra money, librarians are going to go buy books with it, whichever pot it is.
See, I'm
Does
okay
that
with
make
that,
sense?
if we have a rationale that we can put in our report. You understand?
Yeah.
Here's the way what you just said, all your narrative that you just said, if we could capture that, here's the way things are developed, this is what we use as our basis of our report, this is the data that we got based on that, and here, and we can build the findings on that, okay? And then that takes care, and then if we want recommendations out in future years, but rather than just say, here it is, you got this money, this is how it's spent, take it or leave it, or, trust us, that doesn't, that doesn't wash with me.
Well, and then the other thing I saw,
He's got a question.
No, go ahead, finish.
I saw in your draft report was the idea of tagging it to actual performance, which I think is a really good way to keep them honest, quite
Well-
honestly. I mean, if you're saying to somebody, we gave you $4 million, you took $4 million to improve this, are we seeing any change in service level? That's another way for you to kind of check, in my suspicious auditor mind, for you to
Yeah.
check whether or not they really spent $4 million more. You should see something for that money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the metrics are, the city is so big, this much money may or may not make a dent. But I think the very fact that you're tracking it is like, I really appreciate that, because that's going to keep people on their toes. So if you say, improve, I'm looking for one that's where they have a box for the, so there's a I was thinking there were spaces in there for the actual metrics.
There's a couple in there, I think, that were.
So fire response times. Just saying, here's how much more money we put towards improving fire response times. And hey, you know what? The response times went up.
But see,
What's going on?
See, you look at 7.3, okay, so you got, we
Right.
had 17 million, but scroll up just a hair. Okay, so then, you got 17 was funded there, and that would be
Yeah.
enough to fund,
Yeah.
so, but
Yeah.
that's all data was in the matrix, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but that's also data that you can check. So then you can hold them accountable for, last year the pavement condition
Right.
index was X.
and then here's reality, expanding gang prevention, no tax revenues were allocated for 2016. That's reality.
Right, right.
So, you're gonna have,
So if you talk on a budgetary basis and in terms of allocations, I think you're going to be able to get those numbers. And maybe what we need to do is go back to the budget office and make sure we've got these spent numbers on a budgetary basis. And then, like you were saying, iterative process, see if that works
Yes.
for you. I don't know why you weren't, why you didn't get those.
that's why we're frustrated. Yep.
Can I throw out one other thought? We've been wrestling around with this fungibility of the funds and that
Right.
it just goes in the big pile and
Right.
who knows what's on. Our strategy on that was to go back 5 years and look at how much money was sent. I like payment. I'm enthused on it, but it's an easy thing to wrestle with,
Payments,
right?
yeah.
If we look at what was spent over 5 years and we have a trend chart or whatever it is, when we put in 17.7 million, does it move that line in a way that makes some sense?
Right.
So if the money on pavement went up by $17,700,000, whether it actually came from this pile of money or Barry Swenson decided he would throw some extra money out of the goodness of his heart. We don't really care as long as we see the effect of that money on the actual funding that went to the pavement, for example, the PCI. So that we're trying to dodge that notion that it's all coming out of one big bucket.
That was in the original draft. I cannot articulate to you because I don't speak budget. I can't articulate why that was a problem, but it was a problem. So I was not
The
clear
money's
as to
just
why.
street pavement.
Well, not just street payment, I'm just
The
saying,
5 year-
the 5 years,
5 year
going back
history.
5 years, that was the problem. The budget office was like, we
Create a
don't want to do
basis.
that.
Creating the history.
Yeah. Because this is version 6, like we've had, or 7, the black and white one is 7, so.
Are these the same, by the way?
They're not actually
Oh.
entirely the same, there's some
Okay.
small changes, which is
Okay.
why it's version 5 versus version 6, but they do say it at the very end.
Oh, they do?
Little stuff on the bottom.
Oh, there we go.
Version 5.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
good.
don't have any vision.
It's at the very, very bottom.
So you see our problem, we're trying to do due diligence in reporting out our findings, but
Right.
we're having trouble with reporting the findings because we haven't got the information to report out of,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Or
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where I don't want to necessarily say I'll do it because I'm not sure I understand what I'm doing. But could this committee, including me, take a look at the adopted budgets for the last 5 years and be able to corral in these big buckets in order to create that history ourselves? Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out, if we can do that off of what the publicly available documents are, because if the budget office doesn't want to do it, then someone else needs to.
Yeah, and you just need a line item in it, so it's got to be a line item, it's got to match up to a line item in the budget.
Right.
Yes, yes.
And obviously, since this is from an MBA, from a very specific year, the verbiage wouldn't be exact, right? I mean, pavement maintenance is a good one, but I mean, is one that's probably the same year over year. But improved fire and medical response is probably going to be not the same. It may be improved fire response, it may be improved medical response, it may be something else related to fire and medical that's not specifically this, like.
There's this line item in the budget for fire emergency response, and it's like
Yeah.
200 million or something.
204 million.
Yeah, I wasn't far off.
That's really good.
Whoa. So you could line that up. I think you're not going to see that big a, so you see, it's going to be
It's
204,
so
and then it's
big.
going to be 212, and then it's
Right.
going to be 220.
It's gonna be a small
and
number.
meanwhile, you're adding in
But
Percentage
to your
change.
point,
4.
you make a good point about the performance measure. You know, did the fire response
Yeah.
improve as a result of the quarter-cent sales tax, you know, regardless of
Is that our
how they
job?
did it? But you know,
Maybe
did it
not.
improve?
That's what's in the report. is
That's
sort
what
of-
was in.
Yeah, we
Right.
talked about it, but, I mean, yeah.
This is my comment.
Yeah.
So
this is yours.
I think the problem is some of these line items are so big that I'm not sure how you would line up your contribution to that.
Because it would barely move the.
It's not going to move the needle that much, but I think at least you should be able to know. So in 16, 17, here was the original budget, and here's where it was actually spent. And you know, they may have left it at 30 just because they didn't go back and redo the budget, they just ate it out of fund balance, so it came in less than they expected, so they just covered it.
Just covered the other.
And didn't reduce
3.5.
those line items.
But, you know, if they
Yes.
originally budgeted 30, they only get 26, once again, that's reality. They
Yeah.
budgeted 26,
Yeah.
not
But
30,
because it's going into the
and
general.
But it's general
actuaries-
fund.
They can just, they can do
Because
that.
it's in the general fund, they didn't necessarily have to go back and cut 4 million
Oh,
from
oh, okay.
improving emergency medical response.
Yeah.
So they just took it out of what we call fund balance, just the bottom line.
I see.
Yeah, but our job is to report on the spending of the sales tax or income,
Right.
and that says 26.5 or whatever it
Right.
is.
Right.
So whether they found other
They-
money
they-
someplace
yeah.
else that they
Right.
spent, wonderful, that's great, we all love that, but where
We
did
only
the
care about
26.5
26
come?
million.
Yes, we only care with that sales tax number.
Right.
I think I might just do it kind of in 2 line items. So one is revenue, so what was budgeted and what was actually received.
That's fine.
And then what did they budget to spend and what did they actually spend? Because what you want to know is if they budgeted to spend 17.7 and they didn't, for some reason.
That's the problem, yeah.
That's what you want to be able to report,
Yes.
where the
Right.
17
And ours
million.
And it's a
To
finding.
report the
and-
reason, it's
and
just to
whatever.
report
We
the-
don't make judgments, you know, it's just what happened. We just, you know,
But if you go down that path, then this matrix we have right here already says that the 2016, 2017 budgeted numbers are spent correctly,
Yeah, that's why it says approved versus collected
right?
in
So,
in this matrix.
So-
But that's why it has to be
But they
reconciled.
match-
That's why
they
this
match exactly.
matrix is really not, this is a draft, or this is working paper, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. It's not something that comes from city manager or somebody, or the auditor that says, hey, here's the real numbers. This is what we use. So right now, as far as I'm concerned, this is working paper, this is working
Got it.
information.
It's
It's
not a
not
final.
something that's,
It's not official.
because I would like to say in my, in this report, that, hey, here's the data that was furnished to us and signed or whatever, communicated by somebody, that, and this is what we're basing the report on.
I mean, I think that works for you, something like the FEA that they did.
Yeah.
That says, here's where we're budgeting the money, and then here's where we spent the money.
I mean, somebody outside reading this report says, what is it based on? And if it's that,
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
fine.
at least
That's
you
what it's
have-
based on.
You have the city manager
Right.
signing that this
Absolutely.
is where he spent money.
you know, going back to what Pete said about, you know, the 5-year history, which is what we talked about early on. Let's say you install solar, okay, based on, you know, guys coming around selling solar, and you go back and you look at your past 5-year electric bills, right? Nothing's changed. I've lived in this house 5 years, I've got the same air conditioner, refrigerator, whatever, TV. Now I've got solar. What's my bill this year compared to the last 5? Okay? You know, I mean, that's your 5-year basis, and it's a good basis, okay? You look at.
It's all we got to work with.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's a good analogy. I mean, you know, that would make it, hey, this is what I've done the last 5 years, and wow, solar is even good or it's bad for me. You know, I'm getting a return on my solar investment or I'm not.
Yeah, and I think you can do that. I'm just, I tend to think way ahead because we do this kind of stuff a lot. But it's like if you've got a $200 million line item, it's going to be jumping a lot because of pension costs and everything else. And your $4 million or $20 million is just going to be subsumed in that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that the 20 million wasn't spent well or appropriately on fire. It's just that the budget for that line item is probably moving up a lot more than the sales tax is contributing for other reasons. They open a new fire station, they do lots of other things. So, but the city's budget documents generally lay out those changes. So as the commission reviews you know, you can see these major line items in the budget, in the proposed city manager's operating budget.
So, you know, we wanted to talk to you in the beginning, okay? So how do we keep you in the loop? No, seriously, you're the only, you know, how do we keep you in the loop?
Sure, it's like, I do have a
Yeah,
job.
that's the reality. I
Other
mean, you know,
things.
this is the most progress we've had, you know.
Oh,
since-
really?
Oh, I'm serious,
Different
yeah.
ones, yeah.
Well, other than this
Yeah.
beautiful
I
document that
mean,
was
you have
created.
done so much work, yeah. So I think you can just invite me back to your meeting. I don't think I need, do you need permission? Do I need
It
permission?
sounded
No, we
like
just
we,
need
it
to
sounded
know.
like we did.
Yeah.
It sounded like we
needed
did.
permission to get you.
Yeah.
here.
Oh,
We couldn't talk to budget people, we
Yeah.
couldn't talk to you.
There was an independent auditor at one time that was gonna get hired, that's never showed up.
Well, that's a
That's
different.
well,
that's-
that, we
fish.
can talk about
Yeah,
that.
that's a separate
that
issue,
story
but
too.
yeah, we
But,
wanted to talk to you because,
yeah,
you know,
I'm
based
happy
on your
to
report,
do-
you know,
I
you-
mean, why don't we go back and find out if there's any rule against it? I don't.
It should be fine, you're allowed to come now that you've sort of been looped in, it
and
didn't.
the other person was the budget person, I forget what her name was.
Bonnie.
Bonnie,
But
somebody.
just, they've
Talk to
been,
somebody, yeah,
they've
that
been
would
so
give us-
slammed with budget
Anyway,
preparations
but,
right now,
no,
that
you're
they're just
fine.
not
Yeah, we're
sleeping,
fine.
so.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're,
Yeah.
you can run, you know, if you can do that, you know, that
Yeah.
would be much
Yeah.
appreciated, really.
Yeah, that
And
would
it's,
be
you know,
good.
it's evenings and you got a full plate as it is, so we appreciate it.
We do. Yeah, no, that'd be fine, whatever I can do to help, yeah. Clearly you're stuck.
Well, whatever help you can give us, we'd appreciate
Yeah,
it.
Great.
We really
Okay.
would.
So here's just my 2 cents for you guys, for you to consider, for the committee to consider would be to get from the budget office some kind of certification or whatever they can provide about the money that was received in 2016 and how the monies were actually spent. So did they stick with their budget? I mean, it appears that you've been told that they spent
What they said they
them
were
on
going to.
the way they were gonna spend it, they said, and so these then would be the numbers. So I think you just need some kind of a verification from them, whether it's somebody coming in person to testify in front of you or somebody giving you a document that says that.
Right.
Sabrina, could you pull up in the letter to Sykes, we listed down at the bottom, I think, yeah, here's what we asked for. Okay, spending and sources of those funds over the last 5 years for those specific categories.
Right. Oh, the last 5 years, or
Again, for us to figure this out, okay?
police response to reduce violent crimes and burglaries.
Those are the items that are in the ballot measure.
Yeah, so what they budget for, I didn't bring my budget book, but they budget, there's a line item for emergency response, I believe, in the police department. I don't think there's any particular line item for violent crime or burglary. So they can get, and their total budget is, okay, you'll correct me on this one,
No, I won't.
350? It's like double fire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's way-
400. Maybe 600, I forget.
Okay,
So-
but in the matrix, there was a improved burglary neighborhood crime, okay, in this matrix. And it says adds ongoing funding of 1.53 million for 14 community services officers, blah, 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 as well as equipment costs with academy start date, blah, blah, blah. The 2016-17 costs assume a March 1 and date cost total 1.9 million. So there was, in the matrix, this matrix, there was a category or something identified as improved burglary neighborhood crime in the matrix that was provided in that memo.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, whether it's accurate or not, but I mean, there was.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'm hesitating on is how easy it is for them to pull the 5 years of spending on, I mean, they can do, you know,
Yeah,
the
okay,
large
but
number.
But once
they
again,
should be able
going
to
back
tell
to this
you.
communication, they could have come back and said, hey,
Yeah.
what you just said, it's difficult for us to do that, here's what we can give you instead.
Yeah.
We never got that dialogue.
Yeah, because see this,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, because then you see this and you say, so did it happen?
Yeah,
Send somebody in front of me to tell me this really happened.
yeah. But once again, that letter went out, was
Yeah,
delivered,
okay.
and we never get a response. You say,
And
hey,
you
you know, we
don't-
can't give you 5 years, but we can give you 1 year. Or
Right.
yeah, whatever, but it never happened. Or what you're asking for, you know, is the way we do things, but it's not, you know, we
I
can't.
mean,
do that.
they are reporting that information, but you guys are getting it from me, and I can't give you a reason is the problem. I can tell you, they've said that it would be unwieldy to do 5 years, which is why the 5 years fell off the matrix. But I can't tell you why, because I don't work in the budget office and I don't understand why.
But, I mean, if an official letter went out, and you know, in business world, usually you get a response back to a letter that goes out, and, you know, that's the way you do business.
Not in the city.
You know,
Do
Sharon.
you know how many letters I've put into the city officially every day that I never get a response to? It's crazy.
You know, one other thing that we should put, how would you do this? If you were on this committee, and you were in charge of the oversight, what would your approach
Right,
to this
yeah.
be? We made this up because we don't know, we're
Right.
rookies, we don't know what we're doing. You know,
We
this
didn't
is
have
what
the
made
dialogue.
sense to us, and we've never gotten any information or any
Right.
response to anything. So this is our idea. If there's an alternative plan, we're happy.
Sure, absolutely.
All we want to do is write a report that says $26.5 million came in and was spent in these areas, and some of them match with what the ballot measure said. At Sam's recent budget thing, I guess it was January, February, he mentioned that some of that money was spent on pensions. Now, is that true? Okay, and it doesn't matter. It's a general fund thing. They can spend it where they want, but we need to report that some of that money was spent over into the pension pot.
But per this,
And
it
that's all we
wasn't.
need to know. But yeah, according to these numbers, no, it was all spent exactly according to plan. So we're lost. We're going nowhere.
That's why we wanted to have the dialogue.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And
I mean,
I
our
think the
confusion makes
problem-
perfect sense.
Yeah, the confusion makes perfect sense, and it makes perfect sense why you want to have the dialogue to figure out what the role is of a Citizens Oversight Committee. Because let me back up. I mean, they have Citizens Oversight Committees all over the state. So for school bond measures, they're required. So that money is coming in off of property tax. It's designated only for these specific things. They're legal restrictions. Goes into a pot. It earns interest while it's sitting there. They have to spend it within a certain period of time. And the oversight committees are charged with making sure that it was spent in that fashion. So most of them do hire an independent external financial auditor to audit that expenditure of funds. And they go through and they sample all the expenditures. And so like on the parks bonds, what did we call the parks bond? The parks bond, the Parks Commission gets a whole, in the city, they get a whole breakdown on where that bond money was spent. And we can audit that kind of thing. So I figured the parcel tax was as close to the sales tax as anything, but the parcel tax all goes into a special fund. And so it's something that where they hire an external auditor. So you may have heard, because my recommendation was we just spend $15,000. It's relatively cheap to get one of these kinds of audits about sales tax. The problem is they don't put it in a special fund and they don't spend the money. So for the parcel tax, they actually spend the money, a lot of it, out of that fund because they're using it to buy books. So they write a check against this fund. With this one, it's just kind of weird. And when I sat down with Lee and Sabrina, I realized I couldn't quite figure out how you would audit. That's why I was trying, when I saw this matrix, I was like, this could work if it shows up as a budgeted line item. Your responsibility is to verify they did spend that money the way they budgeted, they told you they budgeted it. And maybe that's enough, and we don't need to worry. Now there is this problem of supplanting, and I know what I call supplanting, which is, did they spend the money on pensions, or did they spend it on this? What you would be asking them to do is to verify that they did budget an additional $4.85 million for this. Now, I can't tell you whether it was actually sales tax money or it was a property tax dollar or a TOT dollar. I don't know which dollar it was. But as long as they're telling you, and it's in the adopted budget, that this much got added to that department's budget
Yes.
to do it.
Yes.
I mean, I think this kind of description that they provided here, and this got pulled from the MBA, right? I mean, that tells you where the money
pretty accurate.
went. And then if you're reviewing the budget document, you should be able to see that monies were added for these things in the regular adopted budget.
Right.
I mean, it'd show up as a line item, a one-time line item in the budget document under changes and additions. So it's under additions and subtractions, I think they call it. So
That would
I
be
think
great.
I would stick with that. And then I loved your report that you laid out that just said, here's where they budgeted the money. And I think that the issue is how you verify that it was spent that way. But that's where, as an auditor, I call it a warm, fuzzy feeling, which is not. Sometimes you can make the numbers add, and the numbers add, you can lock it down. Other times, whether or not they funded 3.0 engineer positions. Did they actually have 3.0 engineer positions the entire year? It's a little more problematic to tell. But if they budgeted for them, it's probably good enough. Because if they didn't spend it this year, they're gonna spend it next year. Does that kind of answer your question?
No.
Like I said, I wish we'd had this conversation back in November, December, or even January.
Yeah.
Can I throw one other really complicating thing out there? We're talking MBA 18 from 16, 17. I have not seen anything
I
for
was just gonna
17,
ask that
18.
question.
Do we know where the intent to spend that, other, I mean, it has to be
There's
spent
no
in these
idea for
categories.
last year's
I mean,
budget.
So
yeah.
did anybody fill it, so, again, I guess I'm just kind of puzzled who actually filled this in. So somebody filled in something for 17.
That was Bonnie from the budget office.
But that doesn't really matter for this current report, right? So-
Right, it's just we're missing $17.7 million
Yes.
that needs to go to street repair.
Yes.
Or somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Street
Somewhere, we're-
repair.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Am I
Somewhere.
prejudiced or what?
No.
Not for pensions, for
Well, but
street
no,
repair.
the one thing that scares me is it says NA, meaning that it ain't going there.
Well, that again, 17, 18.
Right, which.
So we don't
the
care.
point is, well,
do
except for your
kinda.
question, it does matter.
Right.
Because the point is, there wasn't an MBA 14 or whatever number for 17, 18. So
Right.
she is just looking at wherever she pulled these numbers from and looking at the language inside the MBA to know that, for example, that first line
Some
item for
was.
street repair is one-time funding.
Right.
So that's why it's not applicable to 17, 18, because there was never a plan to repeat it.
Right.
But she wouldn't know what they used the 17.7 for.
Yeah, but my
instead,
point
which
is, that's next year's committee's problem.
Right, except that if we're
Okay.
structuring it in such a way, we need to figure out,
Yeah, we need to be looking
Ahead of time.
forward, but
Right.
basically,
Yeah.
right now, we're reporting on
Yeah.
16, 17,
Right, right.
$26.5 million. That's what we got to mess with.
But I'm assuming that there's so much demand for your jobs that you guys will probably be here next year. Just in case you are, getting them nailed down to where they're spending the money this year. I mean, we're coming in on the close of the fiscal
Right.
year.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I mean, I think you all should know where they're spending that money. I mean, if I were you.
We agree with that, yeah.
I'd want to know what at least they budgeted for this year, just because I'm thinking the year's closing down. You know, nobody wants to come on later.
Are you implying that they treated call it $30 million, the local sales tax increment, that they thought of that as separate money and they said, well, how are we going to allocate that? Or,
Well,
you know, in other words, in these
yes.
different categories? They did that in 16,
They
17.
did that in 16, 17, and I would think that they need to do that in every year from here
Yeah,
on out.
absolutely.
I mean, it goes
that
for
could be
15
another funding
years,
for
right?
you guys,
15.
actually.
Yeah, if they
To
didn't do
request
it.
that there are MBs, well, there was no
Yeah.
MBA for
So-
17,
I don't remember,
18.
I looked and I didn't see any
No,
I
MBA
didn't
for the
see
current
I looked
year.
too and it
Yeah,
wasn't.
Yeah,
And they're saying that the revenue for 18, 19 is supposed to be 41.8.
Which is an increase in that number, so.
It's a big increase.
Yeah.
So I'm like, where's the 11?
Is that the total sales tax or
The
the quarter cent?
incremental.
That's
No,
the
quarter
local
cent,
sales
quarter
tax.
cent,
Yeah.
The
okay.
local,
And it's
now,
stuck in the
that's a
streets.
budget.
Where's it going? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so
16,
got another
17 was
11
only a
million
partial
for my
year.
potholes
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Yeah, so 16, 17 was only a partial year.
yeah.
Right.
9 months.
So
So
now
they're
we've
expecting
got a full
40
year.
is what I think they were expecting
Yeah.
for 17, 18,
Right.
Right.
or ongoing, 40,
Yeah.
more or less 40 million a year.
But we didn't know what came in last year either.
17, 18, it's estimated local sales tax will end the year at 41 million.
Okay,
17, 18.
Yeah.
so the current year, yeah.
So what they're saying in this, and it's all forecast, was it was 26.5 was actually the estimated actually received. There's this real lag in sales tax.
All right.
So 26.5 for 16, 17. So that's what you want to make sure is properly spent. And then 41 for 17, 18. And 41.8 for 18, 19. You know, they've got in here these quarterly numbers. You could ask for the quarterly numbers. You could ask for the committee to be updated, depending on how frequently you want to meet. Most of these citizens oversight committees meet like once a year, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Once a month right now.
Or
Sometimes
twice
twice
a
a
month.
Yeah.
Sometimes twice a year.
Yeah.
We've been meeting on a regular basis.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
you,
To
if you
get this
see,
thing
every square it
off
says,
the
I
dime.
see special
That's why-
meetings,
that's why
special
we're
meetings. It
frustrated.
says
Oh, I
1,
never-
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 meetings this year. Just this year.
So much.
April.
That's why we're
The
frustrated.
voters, thank you. Now if we can just get you the right answers.
Right.
Yeah.
The right information.
So, are we, all agreed here, and I don't know what it's motionable because this is all Sabrina's report.
It's not motionable.
That's right, we're still in the report.
Yeah, it's not motionable.
Anyway, are we
guys.
all agreed here that we would like Karen to be,
Sharon.
Sharon to be part of this process, or give us, be the liaison, or whatever it is to
Are you
keep
making a
us.
friendly request to her?
Yes.
Since it's not motionable.
No, but I mean, if it's.
I think just make the request and I can be here, yeah. So let me know. I'm hoping you don't meet every 2 weeks.
No, well,
No,
we usually
it's every
meet the
month.
first,
No.
we meet the first Wednesday of the, first Wednesday.
But that may not be what we need either going forward.
Yeah, if you get it figured
We can
out, we can
solve
slow
this.
it way back
Yeah,
down
you can,
again. It's
yeah.
just,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just until you get it figured out, it's every month.
And that's where, yeah,
Yeah.
once we get it figured out, we wouldn't have to be anywhere near as often.
No, I'm happy to help however I can.
And I think
Because
we
that
got to-
kind of
We can't
puts
vote on
a-
anything. Are you done with your report yet?
Well,
This is still my
because here's where I'm going with it. If Sharon stays in the loop, then, the letter to the mayor and the
rules committee.
rules committee kind of,
You can defer the decision on this,
yeah.
what you're trying to say?
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
I'd like to approve the letters and then defer the sending.
Okay.
I'd like to have us ready
You guys
and
can
loaded and ready to
absolutely
go
do
that. Locked and
because.
loaded.
Yeah, yeah.
I understand that.
In case we get a demand that we
your-
need to have our report out
Thank you
next
for
week.
my report.
Well-
And Sharon can now.
Well,
Well,
in
the best
case
report
we
you've
can't
ever done.
figure it, in case we
Yeah.
can't work it out with the budget office.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
So
think.
we'll then what we'll do is going away from this, let's get together and sit down
Please,
with
I would
budget.
absolutely love that.
Sharon needs to get a copy of the charter, the plan, and the report, and the revised matrix, the updated matrix, which is what we should be working with.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in this revised matrix. I mean, there's a lot of, they've tried to answer the questions.
What did you say? Charter, plan,
Report
and the letter.
And the latest matrix.
Unfortunately,
Well,
we've
yeah,
left
and
a lot of questions
correspondence.
that we
Letter
have
to
to answer.
Okay, I have it. I'm gonna send you an email with like a ton of documents tomorrow.
To
Or
fund
Friday,
other
Friday.
one-time policy.
That's what Friday. I'm gonna
There's-
overpromise, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Really.
yeah. Do you need me for anything else? You good?
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
You want to listen to all the rest of us.
Go home.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
what
you.
you're doing.
Oh, thank
Really appreciate it. Sorry it's so difficult.
It just got easier. to
My life.
be honest with you. Yeah.
What do you mean you don't have this information? Take care.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Have a good night.
Okay, now,
Report's done.
did anybody?
Great report,
manage
Sabrina.
to write down what, because I can't listen and write. Did anybody write down what the recommendation was?
You got it, I think, most of it.
You gonna need me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
From
wrote
what I
down
saw.
a bunch of what she,
Yeah.
what she said, because
Kinda-
I need to report it in the minutes, so I was
Well,
like.
yeah, but can we kind of have a
Describe it.
summary of what that was?
So she, let me see. So she asked some clarification, some clarifying questions. She explained about it going to the general fund. She said the amount collected, where it came from. She said you could ask to be put into a special fund, and then she gave the option is to use the budget document to compare what was planned with what was spent, and to really then, so she said this is fine as long as that's what we're tracking only.
Right.
What they decided, what they planned on spending versus what was actually spent, and making sure that the total number is never exceeding how much was actually coming in, right? So that there's a comparison of, we thought when the MBA 14 was originally drafted, that could be a number. We thought it was gonna be 30, it was actually 26 and a half. So these numbers, the approved numbers can be the same as what they are now, but the collected numbers should actually be lower. What may be difficult in discussing this with the budget office is exactly what she said, which is that because it goes into the general fund, the city just kind of backfills it and nobody really, it's only if like they
Nobody's
can't
auditing it.
backfill it that
Yeah.
somebody pays attention to it,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So if the money wasn't there, they would have a problem.
Then they
It'd
would
be
have a
shortfall.
problem with it.
Right.
But because it was only, $3.5 million short, the city was able, because they're, I don't know, enough people retired or were sick
They got
or
buried.
they got new, I don't know, a new AC system in the building that's more efficient or something, like for whatever reason there were savings that meant that nobody paid attention that the sales tax came in $3.5 million short.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen, which is why she and I are going to go sit down and talk to the budget office.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And then I think all that I got out of the real part of it is that we do need to have that certified in some format.
Right, either written
Yeah.
or have somebody come into the commission
Right,
and report it.
right. Exactly.
Written would be the preferred.
Hmm?
Written would be the preferred.
Right.
Where it's documented.
And I wrote that here. I wrote it in a different place.
Let me backtrack a half a step on what you just said, Sabrina, because if we said there was going to be 17,700,000 or $30 million came in, only 26.5 came in. Instead of spending 17.7 on the out of the
Pavement.
local thing on the pavement, we had to spend $3.5 million less.
Right.
Okay, but we made that up through some other funding. I think that should be in our report.
Yeah, that's totally fine. It's
I
just
think we would
somebody-
want to say, hey, you know, the
but
money
it's
wasn't.
It's not visible at the moment, right?
Right.
Which is my point.
Right, so we want to show that the money was spent in the places where the voters
Approved.
asked for.
Well,
They wanted it
but
spent.
that's
Yes.
because this document's not correct, right? So the approved document number was actually 31 million. The collected funds was actually only 26.5.
Right,
And then the spent funds was 30. So that's what would allow you to do that if this was done correct.
if that was real, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Because
and maybe
then
it
you would
is,
see that there's a shortfall number and the two things would track.
Right.
Because that's really what should happen.
right. And I think if I'm a voter and I read that it says you took $3 million from other places to make good on this promise, I'm up with you.
No,
I'll-
exactly.
Yeah,
you
they'd
know,
be really excited. Like,
Exactly.
good. They came
Yeah, they
in.
would.
They
Yes.
came in short, like more than expected.
Yeah.
Way more than even
Right.
30. And yet, they still spent money on the things that
Right.
they care about.
That would be a
Fabulous.
great result for us to report. And-
Right,
and
no,
a
no,
real
that's the way I look
feel-good
at it
thing,
too.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
we
it-
got to know all those numbers
I mean, that
before we can do
also
that.
makes me think that thinking about writing your letter for the future for this year, you might want to ask about having MBAs about the sales tax included, because I don't know who to ask to find out what happened to the 17.7 that wasn't earmarked to roll over in 17-18 that got spent in the first year on street repair, because
I'm pretty sure we have a good idea where it went, but that's
I mean,
gonna
it
be
went
weird.
to a bunch of all the other city services. I mean, that's where the money went, but exactly where,
But that's not Measure B funding stuff, right? So I mean, we have to show Measure
well, maybe
B
it did,
stuff.
right? But
Right.
we don't know.
Well, we don't have to show it; they have to show it.
Right.
So I think as long as we're getting something certified from somebody, then we're easier going forward with this and stamping that it's okay. I mean, we don't have any choice, right? I mean, kind of is what it is.
That's true. Okay.
But I like the idea of asking for the VAs going forward.
Should we put that on the agenda for next month?
I mean, you guys can just include that in the letter if you want to. It
What's
doesn't
that?
need to be agendized.
Letter to who?
Specifically, as like a
Well, we have to
standout,
write a
I'm
letter
saying.
though, right?
Yeah, the letter, when you guys are talking about the letter, if you want to include it, you will all vote on it then. I mean,
The
you
letter
can-
to,
The report, the letter that accompanies the report.
Oh.
Or as a part of the report, I mean, you guys can, what I showed was the report template officially. This one, no, this one. This is officially the report template
yes.
and I still have to go through and highlight the areas where, in red,
Yeah.
where, like this, for example, this would be different, right? This information would be different, because that number is not the same, in the next year. But when you guys submit this report every single year, you could put down here
In
in
a
the
summary.
summary, or even somewhere you could include another line item here separately that says, we were able to do it this first year because of MBA 14. We know that there were no MBAs about the sales tax in the 17-18 fiscal year. So tracking this information in the future is going to be much more difficult because some of these pots of money were not ongoing, period, right? I mean, I don't know if that's exactly the verbiage you would use, but that's the gist of it, right? So,
Yeah, well, that 8, that says description, so you could have an 8-1, 8-2, future recommendations, or you can even have a 9, this future recommendations or something.
That's what I think, it would be helpful if we had this information provided to us.
right.
Yeah.
And then if,
It either happens or it doesn't.
and I have no idea what 17, 18 is going to look like. Y'all are like, we are not going to be on this committee, 17, 18. But
Are we going to issue a report this year?
For
I don't
16,
see how
17.
we can possibly
I don't see
issue
how
a
we
report.
can.
Well, you guys can issue a report at any point. It doesn't have to be tied to the budget cycle. You may have to replace some committee members, but the committee is standing. It continues to stand.
Right.
Just because the fiscal year ended doesn't mean that it doesn't continue to exist. So you guys could produce a report in August or in September,
Just as a status report.
right, about this, no, I mean this
The
report.
real report.
We
In the
could,
16,
we could.
17, and then because it took so long to get this all figured out, hopefully you guys would take a big long break and come back in April
Next year.
of next year, of 2019, to do the 17-18 one,
Right.
right? And then it would be done much faster because
Right.
you've already got the
We've
template, you've got every report, everything worked out. And we have whatever answers we needed to work out with the budget office so that this document provides you with the information you need every single
The
year.
answers from the budget
Yeah.
office to make this work.
Well, I'm saying, if
Yeah, that's-
this is certified by our next meeting time, in theory, we could do a report the
Yeah.
following
Yeah, you
month.
could.
That's right.
Just a thought, can a report in June say we can't certify that?
You guys can write a letter
Is
as a
there
part
any
of your
reason why in
report.
June our report couldn't be, we don't have sufficient information to certify or
Right.
to verify that the money was spent in the way it was?
I mean, you guys could take this report and in the findings sections, that could be your response for June, if that's what you
Because
want.
that's true.
But there is no deadline built into the measure. It says annual, but it doesn't say, I mean, you could do an annual report for all 30 years the last year, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily specify that it has to be done.
Are you running
Yearly.
for reelection?
Yeah.
Could I have a little more enthusiasm?
She totally is. She just said she was gonna finish her statement to me today.
Would you be willing to stay on the committee till after
To reduce some of my hours, I'm trying to finish.
No, but to finish the report, would you be willing to stay on?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about you?
Yeah, I don't know at this point.
Okay, how about you? Terry, how about you? You're a lame duck, you're not gonna be here.
Pete the lame duck.
Yeah.
Okay, I would rather, if we can get a majority of us to stay on, I would rather produce a finished report. That's my, and I think if Sharon stays in the picture, and we can do that, I mean, she has credibility with me. I'm hopeful.
Well, and I think from my perspective, what's helpful about her is that she can translate what I'm
Yes.
trying to say to the budget office, because I don't know that we've ever, like, I think we just keep talking past each other. So, that
Are
would be
you,
really helpful.
are you running for reelection?
So I'm running for reelection, but my council office has stated really clearly that they would prefer to get rid of the gray-haired old men and get a more diverse crowd of people on the commission.
It's not their call.
Well, whether or not they get appointed is something else, right?
Yeah, it's a whole different
Selected.
They
story.
gotta go through the process.
Well, do. That's why there's a process,
Your
right?
chances of getting elected are good or not?
Being that the other 5 came from the council office? No.
Really?
No, I don't. Michael might, because he doesn't have enough background to get in trouble. I have, 4 years of stuff that, not that it's going to get me in trouble, but, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It's very weird. The fact that there's 7 people signed up, I only know of one and he's backed out. The other 5 I've never met.
Actually, Jim Cantori was the best neighborhoods commissioner there's ever been on the thing.
Mhm.
And
So
he's on the list.
Yeah, he's on the list.
Yeah,
Is
he's
he?
great, he's great,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Was he in there before us, or?
When you stepped away, one of the questions I brought up was, whether we do a report, like kind of now, that's really not complete or final, but it's a report, or wait till, after June or whatever, the elections. And if most of us agree to stay on the committee, at least to produce a final report.
Right.
But that's kind of, well, I'm the same way, I don't know, I've got people running against me, so I don't know what my chances are either. It's not a good year for old white guys.
No, it's really not, actually.
And so
It's really not.
That's reality. That's reality.
okay,
I'm not kidding.
can I just clarify that you just said this is not a good year for old white guys? Within the very narrow scope of the caucus process for the City of San Jose's Neighborhoods Commission, I'm sorry, just because I think it's a pretty good year for old white guys in general, usually. Okay.
No, actually, I mean, our council, they actually made that statement last night.
Well, you were at the
Oh my
same,
God, really?
Yeah,
Council?
yeah.
you were at that meeting, and that guy,
At a public
Oh, I heard
meeting.
it at United Neighborhoods, that's where I heard it from.
you know,
Meeting?
That's-
Okay.
that's-
I bit
The
my
United
tongue in
Neighborhoods?
reply,
Yeah,
I
when I got
didn't,
up and
I had a response, but
Yeah.
I bit my
In the
tongue.
neighborhood meeting, someone brought up the fact of how, lack of diversity.
Yeah,
And it's true, but at the same time, I think it's not the fault of the old white guy, see if I can say it.
Who stepped
It's-
up?
That's who stepped up.
That's right.
And
That's
we
who
have
stepped
some really good talent. I think we need to do a better job of outreaching, and people need to step up.
correct.
I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
looking at, I was happy
Absolutely.
there was 5 people who ran, because I had to be appointed. I want people in my neighborhood to develop their leadership skills. I want them to understand governance. I want them to get into these committees.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's a white person, hey, but it's a very, I got a very mixed bag in my neighborhood, just reading the last names, I don't know the people, I only know one of them. But, it's great as a comment, but so what is the solution? To me, it's like, well, then let's all encourage people to get in there. I'm happy that we have 5. If I think any of them would be really great,
Yeah.
I may step down at the last minute and not go through with it, because I want other people to step up to the plate. So I'm
But
happy.
have them step up to the plate and then have them stick through.
That's
That's
the
the
problem.
Because that's the other
Commitment.
problem, is
Yeah,
people
the
step
commitment.
up thinking, oh, well, this is just a place I can go, show up at the meetings, it looks great on my resume, and then
They don't
then
contribute.
they actually find out this commission does a lot of work, and they're like, wait, no, I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
I think I remember I'm on my 3rd, 4th person now in 4 years, so, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
So that is the comment.
Anyways,
Make
I
it
won't pick
super
on you white guys.
No, but
You
it's
guys are here because
it's
you bring something.
reality. I mean,
Yeah, the
and
reality.
that came up at that meeting, and I really,
It's been coming up all over the city lately.
I held my tongue, and I didn't respond to him, but
You just said, hey, if you know some people, them too,
that's not what
sign
I
up.
would, that's not
Sign
what
up.
I would have
Exactly.
said.
That's what I would say.
But,
Step up. Step up.
Commissioner Cunningham is frustrated.
well, no, I just,
We want to move on with the agenda?
well, yes, however, so, do we have, kind of, sort of, we stay on and produce a final
Is
report?
it permitted?
Yeah, we're staying in committee.
Oh, okay, all right. I
These
would
committees-
commit to finishing.
Because I'd like to see a final report that's not, I hate to leave a job half done. I really
Same
do.
here.
I just.
I concur
it's just-
100%.
it just doesn't sit well with me.
But it's only predicated, if we get this thing certified next month, then it happens. If it doesn't get certified next month, it doesn't happen.
But we.
And that's what we write.
Maybe in August or so, we can produce the final report. That's my point, so.
You
I
guys
think
can
we
have that
I think if
conversation.
Sharon stays
Yeah.
in the loop, I think
Exactly.
we can.
I got a feeling we're
Especially-
gonna get somebody to certify this.
Especially if we
somehow.
get a-
Quickly.
Yeah, I
No.
think it's gonna be, I think
If
it's
we
gonna
get
be
a
certified.
dialogue with her,
Yeah.
like I said, if this had happened a couple of months ago, we'd be we'd be okay.
She's gonna be the one certifying it, just to be clear, but that's a whole different story.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
All right.